We'll now move to the next presentation. I'm going to ask Ms. Amina Maknoon if she'll just come and give us a quick presentation on internet gaming, although most persons have touched on it already, but I think she will do, a better job than the others have done so far.
So I have the task of trying to maintain your attention this afternoon, but I'm fortunate in that I have an exciting topic to speak about. Not as exciting as horse racing, Mr. Hamilton, but still exciting. Just by way of introduction, no. Sorry, I'm just waiting for the ICT. Gambling, the playing of games of chance and wagering on the outcomes of sporting or other events, is one of the oldest activities which man is engaged in. And traditionally such gambling has taken place in clubs, gaming rooms, casinos, and the racetrack. However, the rapid explosion in internet access and use has in turn led to the growth of the online gambling market. So, what is internet gaming? The term internet gaming is often used interchangeably with internet or online gambling and refers to all form of gambling via the internet, including using computers, mobiles, or wireless devices connected to the internet. And interactive gambling, which is a slightly broader term, includes other forms of remote gambling, generally conducted via digital means such as digital television. Gamblers typically upload funds to the online gambling websites via electronic payment services, wire transfers, and play games either against each other or the house, and withdraw their winnings by either check or online payment service. I know that you've already heard some of the statistics on online gaming. It's one of the fastest growing segments in the gambling industry, and some statisticians put it at in more than 20 billion US dollars worldwide in 2009, and estimated to grow to over 40 billion US dollars in 2015. Internet gambling is now an established fact in the global economy. The question facing governments is whether to prohibit internet gambling within their respective territories or to permit it in some form of licensing, regulation, or taxation regime. The various justifications and rationale put forward by governments for the prohibitionist model are essentially about control over the flow of information, goods, money, and the protection of general morals and the vulnerable elements of society. However, unlike in the case of a country such as China, where the national infrastructure allows restrictions to be placed on internet access as it develops, thereby allowing the government some prospect of being able to track and restrict individual access to the internet, the advent of the internet has, in the case of most Western democracies, put the power to move money, ideas, and information worldwide into the hands of a large number of individuals. It is therefore arguable that in the cases of the US, Europe, and even Jamaica, where the internet was introduced into a comprehensive pre-existing telecommunications network, restriction of access to the internet and therefore a prohibitionist approach to internet gambling was always a virtual impossibility. A simple cost-benefit analysis by such countries reveals that the expenditure needed for surveillance and detection of individual access to forbidden sites would be prohibitive compared to the social harm likely to be incurred by such access, and would be a poor use of government resources, not to mention could present a potential constitutional challenge. Some of the factors which have contributed to the explosion of internet gambling are the legalization of internet gambling in several countries, such as the UK, the inherent and increasingly apparent difficulties in its prohibition, the opening of new potentially lucrative markets in Asia, further advances in technology and increasing accessibility of the internet, increased confidence in online financial transactions, and the economic crisis which has prompted governments of both developed and developing countries to consider the potential of internet gaming to bring in much needed revenue. It is indeed interesting that one of the world's oldest pastimes is now one of the most advanced industries in terms of the extent to which it leverages information communications technology. And whilst internet gambling owes its existence to the explosion in technological advancement, the legal grey area that it occupies internationally makes it rather ironic that the internet gambling industry now creates the greatest demand for technology, such as software development and broadband access. Every advancement in technology invariably reflects itself in the internet gambling environment. The high-resolution 3D graphics, text messaging, chat features, realistic depictions of natural and man-made features are very important for the realistic look and feel of virtual casinos, card games, and horse races. The BGLC, through its membership of the International Association of Gaming Regulators and engagement with local industry, recognizes that the question of whether and to what extent internet gaming should be facilitated and regulated in Jamaica is one which must be addressed urgently. To this end, the BGLC has undertaken significant research in this regard with a view to preparing policy recommendations for the Honourable Minister. What follows is a brief summary of some of its findings. So internet gaming can include a number of different types of games, and you have some examples there which have been spoken to earlier on today. In the interest of time, I'm going to try and abridge some of these slides. However, whilst the explosion of internet gambling has revolutionized the gambling industry and brought with it lucrative new business opportunities, there are important concerns associated with internet gambling which policymakers face when contemplating its regulation. And these can be categorized as follows: problem gambling, protection of minors, anti-money laundering, cybercrime and cybersecurity, jurisdictional and taxation issues. With problem gambling, the concern is to protect the public from addictive behaviors that create negative externalities, and I believe that Mr. Richard Henry will be speaking to you about some of these. Although these concerns already exist in the offline environment, they are heightened due to the convenience and accessibility of internet gambling, as well as its detached nature, which leaves gamblers with no tangible representation of how much they are gambling. However, some empirical evidence suggests that despite the increase in the amount and variety of gambling offerings, the prevalence of pathological gambling is essentially the same as it was 30 years ago. And it should also be borne in mind that internet gambling with its attendant technology provides operators with more sophisticated methods to track individual transactions compared to the brick and mortar gambling environment, and therefore allows for studies of players' real behavior and the effective monitoring and control of problem gambling. Protection of minors. Another serious concern is that internet gambling will be dangerously available to children who may use false identification or an adult's credit card number to access sites. These concerns have been addressed in different ways across the globe. In most jurisdictions, there are, of course, age limits. There is the requirement for the establishment of dedicated player accounts. And banks and financial institutions will often provide an additional layer of age verification because overdrafts and credit cards are not usually issued to minors. Limitation on the accessibility of payment systems automatically restricts the ability of minors to gamble online. In some jurisdictions, they also implement controls on the advertisement of internet gambling products so as to ensure they're not broadcast in certain time slots and that they're not placed close to advertisements which minors may frequent. Anti-money laundering. We've already spoken about this to a large extent earlier on today. There's very little evidence to date that any large-scale money laundering has taken place using internet gambling sites. In fact, a prominent scholar has argued that the realities of internet technology make it highly unlikely that internet gambling sites increase the risks of large-scale money laundering. For one thing, camouflaging illegally gained money from its original locale is very difficult, since the mechanisms of the system require identification of where the money is coming from and where it is going. Further, the process of complicating the paper trail so that dirty money cannot be distinguished from clean, known as layering and integration, is extremely challenging in an environment where everything is tracked technologically. However, casinos, including online casinos, have been designated by the Financial Action Task Force as businesses with a high risk of money laundering, and it is incumbent upon any country considering legalization of internet gambling to put in place anti-money laundering measures. Cybercrime and cybersecurity. The nuances of internet gambling make it more susceptible to abuse by both the gambler and the house. The house can manipulate its internet gambling software to change the odds associated with the game. And for his part, the online gambler can commit cybercrime, either by manipulating the odds in his favor or by targeting the assets of the online venue itself by stealing the credit card information of its customers. That being the case in a prohibited and therefore unregulated industry, consumers who access offshore internet gambling operations and find themselves the victim of cybercrimes will have little recourse. And therefore, again, a regulated environment would provide better protection against the threat of such cybercrimes. There are, of course, a number of jurisdictional issues associated with the legalization of internet gambling. Firstly, locally licensed internet gambling operators offering their services to residents of other jurisdictions. Having regard to the fact that there are still many jurisdictions that prohibit internet gambling, or indeed all forms of gambling, by their citizens, and Antigua's ongoing battles with the United States, governments embarking upon the regulation of internet gambling in their jurisdictions must consider how to address this issue. And one approach which has been taken by the UK is to establish a prohibited territories list, making it an offence for licensed operators to offer their services to such jurisdictions. There's also the jurisdictional question of overseas licensed internet gambling operators offering their services to local residents. A state's ability to exclude foreign legal gambling or any other type of commerce falls within the realm of international law and trade agreements. However, once a state decides to legalize a form of gambling, it would be difficult to justify excluding the same form of gambling by a foreign legal provider on public interest or morality grounds. And recent decisions from across the world indicate that excluding foreign legal gambling merely to protect local operators from competition is not a good enough reason. However, Any jurisdiction will be concerned about the protection of its local population from the potential dangers of overseas operators. And such jurisdictions may consider measures such as requiring local internet service providers to block certain illegal sites that are identified and listed by the regulatory body, as well as the prohibition of any advertising of those illegal sites. Taxation issues. Minister. As with all e-commerce transactions, it is important for a government contemplating the legalization of internet gambling to address the issue of taxation, since it is of course hoped that the legalization would bring in important revenue. The transnational character of internet gambling raises important questions about whom and how to tax and at what rate. The UK, for example, recently amended its taxation regime so that effective December 2014, internet gambling must be taxed according to where the customers are based rather than on where the operator is registered. This is intended to capture those operators based in offshore jurisdictions such as Gibraltar. Certainly, the UK government considers that it has a market which is lucrative enough to impose a relatively high tax rate of 15% of gross profits of internet gambling companies without suffering much attrition. However, when embarking on the road of internet gambling, the question of when to tax and at what rate is a delicate one, which should be considered carefully in order to achieve the balance of securing important government revenue whilst not stifling the development of the industry in that jurisdiction. So that being said, what's the state of play in Jamaica? On June 22nd, 2010, the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Amendment Act of 2010 came into force. And the most notable of those amendments for the purposes of this presentation were those that introduced the concepts of electronic to various forms of gambling. And it means relating to technology, having electrical, digital, magnetic, wireless, optical, electromagnetic, or similar capabilities. A definition of electronic ticket was in turn included. And there are also definitions included for electronic betting and online betting. More specifically, paragraph 8.1 of the second schedule to the Act provided that the Commission may approve in writing a licensed bookmaker accepting bets by electronic means at his licensed head office. The 2010 amendments also updated the definition of lottery to provide for alternative mediums through which lotteries may be made available to the public. So lottery now, the definition of lottery now includes including any electronic game method or device. The BGLC's interpretation of these 2010 amendments is that they establish the basic framework for internet gambling in the limited form of internet betting as well as the sale of lottery tickets online. The BGLC is therefore proceeding with the preparation of drafting instructions for the Minister's approval for the regulatory superstructure, including technical standards and conditions to facilitate these two forms of internet gambling. But apart from the sale of bets and lottery tickets over the internet, the Act does not specifically sanction any other form of internet gaming, such as internet poker, online bingo, or electronic gaming machines. So in terms of next steps, what is required is to flesh out an appropriate and effective regulatory framework for online betting and online lottery sales, which incorporates the key elements of an effective regulatory regime as identified earlier. A fundamental prerequisite to an effective regulatory framework for internet gambling is the requirement that such gambling should only be conducted through the establishment of dedicated player accounts. This is the only way in which the key elements of the regulatory framework may be established, monitored, and enforced. The rapid development of internet gambling internationally means that it's unnecessary for Jamaica to reinvent the wheel when considering an appropriate framework for internet gambling. However, important policy decisions are to be made on some of the issues mentioned earlier. Whatever type of internet gambling model is adopted by Jamaica, there are precedents that exist in jurisdictions which the BGLC is leveraging through its international associations and the engagement of expert consultants in the field, and it is expected that final decisions will be taken with the input of its local stakeholders. In tandem with the above, it's also important for the government to engage in a research and consultation process into the other forms of internet gambling not currently permitted by the Act, such as online bingo, poker, electronic gaming machines, and traditional casino games, in order to determine whether it should also legalize these forms of internet gambling. The BGLC and the Casino Gaming Commission will play an integral role in this process. So it should be apparent that in democratic jurisdictions where the internet has arrived into a pre-existing and developed communication structure and is readily accessible by many of its residents, governments have little prospect of effectively maintaining a prohibitionist stance against internet gambling, especially where land-based gambling is already legalized. The net results of such attempts are that residents will simply interact with foreign, illegal, or unregulated sites and are left unprotected. Social ills and their attendant costs proliferate, and important revenue is diverted overseas. It's arguable that rather than trying to maintain the anomalous position of having legal land-based gambling whilst prohibiting the same offerings over the internet, the approach of the UK and other jurisdictions which have adopted a comprehensive regulatory structure for internet gambling should be followed, where all the key policy issues are addressed. These regulatory models are not without their teething problems, and with the passage of time and further advancements in technology, will require periodic refinements. And this is where Miss Gaming comes into her own, because regulation in this area will always follow behind the technological advances and innovative business models. However, the BGLC recognizes that it's imperative to continue the dialogue and research and put in place a workable model for internet gambling regulation to protect Jamaicans and realize an important source of revenue. And so, whilst I've come to the end of this presentation, the subject of internet gaming is certainly not at an end, but rather is to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. Anybody have any quick question or so? Yes.
It's Jack. Wayne Stewart here. Just a quick concern. I'm fully okay with the benefits from internet gambling or gaming. What I'm concerned about with all the necessary barriers, procedures, legislation that need to be put in place for internet gambling to be properly monitored and regulated, I am wondering how soon will that be in place? Secondly, if the Commission is looking to all the necessary systems and procedures that are going to be needed for this to be properly monitored, because if you look at the Commission position, as far as I'm aware, it's difficult to monitor lotteries, it's difficult to monitor horse racing, gaming, and then you're going to take on text betting, telephone betting, internet gaming, which is far more complicated than all the others combined. So I'm wondering what time frame you're looking at here, and two, are you looking at what is required to get all of this on board? Thirdly, what is the size of the internet and gaming industry in Jamaica? So is it worth it? Is it worth implementing something like this? So these are some of my concerns.
Well, when first start, internet gaming in Jamaica at this stage is an illegal activity.
Fine.
So it would not be monitored or tracked in any way at all. In addition, in order for us to introduce internet gaming, we'll have to use the same technology to monitor the technology that is being used. And so we have to use a time frame which, as yet, we have not even got the approval to start putting together the necessary legislation. And in addition also, we have already engaged an overseas consultant to lead us in that process.
So you're saying it's not anytime soon then, probably another 3-4 years?
That seems too long.
Okay.
Excuse me, could I say something? I'm quite interested in getting in the internet gaming. Now, casino generates enormous revenue streams for providers and for government through taxation and licensing fees.
Who is speaking?
Mark, Treasure Hunt Gaming. Now, as you were speaking earlier, the aim here is to create more jobs. So that would mean more jobs for persons to monitor phone gaming, more jobs for people to monitor the internet gaming. We have to follow protocols, and of course, as the lady was speaking earlier, from UK and other places that do online gaming, you have things you can follow, examples that we can use to have this started in Jamaica as soon as possible. It will create more jobs, so it will be monitored. So I believe that internet gaming is a way forward for Jamaica right now.
Well, you said you're just making some comments, right?
Comments, but it's really something that I'm intrigued about right now. And we
Yes,
can-
anything that can generate economic activity, yes. The BJLC and the government will be interested in it, but we have to do it right and to ensure that we protect the punters and also minors in getting involved with this activity. So we are going through it step by step and doing it right to get it right first time on time.